Hey everyone, you're watching Conversations in Pop Culture, and I'm your host, Andrew Davis. And this episode is brought to you by my sponsors, Mixum Printing, the smarter way to print. I know printing your creative project can be confusing and stressful, but Mixum is here to make it easy. From their instant quote calculator to let you get as many quotes as you want for free to their 24-hour customer service support, Mixum is here to make sure your printing experience runs smoothly from start to finish. And right now, you can choose from a range of premium printing options and materials. And the company has also printed so many successful Kickstarter campaigns. A bunch of them you've even heard about on this very show. And they currently offer services in the United States, Canada, Australia, and the UK. And Mixum can print and reach your audience anywhere in the world. So if you're ready to print smarter, not harder, head over to Mixum.com. And right now, they are running a promotion where listeners on my show to drop my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab of a current order to get a 5% discount on their first order. So that is Mixam.com. Again, type my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab of your current order to receive a 5% discount on your first order. Also, and I don't know about anybody else, but I like my comic books arriving in pristine condition. And I use for my comic supplies, BCW supplies, and you can use Pop Anime Comics at checkout to get 10% off your complete order, bags, boards, and anything else you need. So that's something that you should do as well. And I have a t-shirt on Redbubble that's in the description. And again, go buy that because, well, I would like to be paid for all my hard work. So having said all that, I have with me for, I believe, the second or possibly the third time at this point, Bret Juliano. And hopefully we're not going to get killed today. Hopefully, because we're going to be talking about gangsters, and we're doing it in a favorable light, of course, right?
Of course.
So welcome back.
Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, no, I am very, very excited to have you back on because I actually like your book. And so you have a Kickstarter going on, which is basically based on a true story, Dust Bunny Mafia 1 to 4. And I know 1 through 3 have been published previously, and we spoke about that. But for those who are just coming in and hearing about this and seeing you for the first time, what is Dust Bunny Mafia? What is based on a true story? And what is the basic premise of your books for those who don't know anything about you?
Yeah. So I've been doing a comic called Dust Bunny Mafia, which is a newspaper style comic for about a decade now. I just saw something in my news feed a couple days ago about, was 10 comics going to be a good enough buffer to get me started? That was from 10 years ago. So I've now done over 750 individual strips. My Dust Bunnies have been included in multiple anthologies, and I've done books, I've done booklets, I've got all sorts of different products with my Dust Bunnies. So it's essentially Looney Tunes meets The Godfather. So I've got a whole cast of different mobster families, rats, crows, Dust Bunnies, kind of set up like the five families of New York, five mobster families. That was the original inspiration for it. And a couple of years ago, I jumped on the Kickstarter platform to come out with my first booklet for Based on a True Story, Volume 1, which is a 24-page zine-style booklet that was, my introduction to tying in real-life mobster stories, where I take about 6 years ago, I moved to Chicago, started getting really involved with the local history, and wanted to tie in my already existing comic with this history and, teach people some of the weird and true stories that are out there.
Yeah,
About
it's a lot of stuff you've tackled, and it's very interesting because obviously everybody knows sort of Goodfellas, Casino, The Godfather, um, and sort of the classics for lack of a better word in the mob world. Everybody knows the Gotti family, for instance. Everybody knows The Sopranos. I live in Bethel, Connecticut, and obviously the Trashers are based off of, and that entire thing, which was on Netflix, and it was like that big, great special. And that was a sort of The Sopranos were based off of to some degree. And so people know those stories, but you have gone into a variety of other stories as well. And so, what is that like on a research level? Because I haven't read everything, but I've read all this stuff. And I'm like, I don't know who this gangster is, and it's kind of weird because I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool, and who's this gangster exactly? And so, what is
Yeah.
that like? Really figuring that out and finding that information, because then you convey that information into 4 to 5 panels.
Yeah. So, I mean, originally it was my kind of distilling of my love to read and my love for true crime. When I lived in LA, I picked up this book called The Five Families by Selwyn Rabb, and it's essentially Selwyn Rabb was a newspaper reporter in New York for years, and he reported on true crime and the mob and everything, and he put out this book which is kind of the mafia Bible. Um, it's like 860 pages, thick hardcover. Um, you do some damage if you're carrying it and someone offends you. Um, but I was reading that, and as I was going through this history of the New York crime families, there were little tidbits that stuck out to me as I was writing my normal comic before I ever started the based on true story stuff. And I'm like, huh, this would be fun to translate into a comic, just kind of work that in. And then the more and more I was working in different angles from these real life characters and stuff, I was like, once I got to Chicago, and then I picked up kind of the quintessential book on the Chicago mob, and you know, I live in Oak Park, which is the first border outside um, Chicago, and it's well known for its mobster history. There's probably 10 or 12 mobsters who had houses in Oak Park, River Forest. Capone is buried about 15 minutes away from where I live, things like that. That I was just like, I can definitely tie this in with my comic and this true story, this history stuff. So when I was going to conventions and shows, I was going to library and literary fests, and people are like, oh, it's like true crime, but it's fiction because you're putting your own spin on it. And I was like, okay, people get it and people like it. And I mean, it's just kind of spun from that. So I have a whole library of true crime books. Um, Used bookstores are my best friend when it comes to that kind of thing. I've got
So let's even talk a little bit about the spin on it, because you've taken an anthropomorphic, and hopefully I got that name right on how to say it. It's a tricky one on it, where every creature is, or every gangster, or every police person, or anybody involved is a type of animal, and
yeah,
obviously there's different distinguishing factors, and people know Cat Shit One is a book that's similar, where everything is an animal. Mouse is kind of the classic, and I think one of the things that sort of set it up. And then you've done it in that style, and that could go either really well, and it's gone very well in your case, or it could be a complete disaster. But what was that like, adding that spin onto it? Because it does definitely make it, I don't want to say friendlier, but it also captures it a lot quicker in certain ways.
yeah. I mean, I always wanted the my comic to be kid friendly or all ages appropriate. I didn't want to go super gritty with it originally. So like taking the, you know, kind of using Looney Tunes or Animaniacs as my base for my inspiration. I wanted something that violence was implied more than actually shown. Um, things like that. And there's a lot of wordplay and different things. Um, and I wanted, I didn't want to have to spell it out necessarily to show every single thing. Readers are smart. And for the most part, you can imply something without actually having to show it. And um,
So, so,
so, I
so
mean,
even talk about that, because obviously everybody knows that gangsters are violent. They're going to commit crimes. They're going to do something. And so there's going to get a point where you don't have to show the violence per se. And also, there's the ability to show all the other sides. Like certain gangsters always used to eat in restaurants. on a particular time and the restaurant was closed, for instance, or they had sort of their hangout spots and there's something going on, or they're trying to put a squeeze on somebody, and you could show that conversation of what they're gonna do to that person, but they're not gonna do it. And it is interesting because there's really no violence in your book per se. It's a lot more dialogue based. It's a lot more
Mhm.
witty based, and it's also a lot more implying. And so, what was that figuring that out? Because it is an interesting thing to not have a violent book, but have implied violence in a book, because that's something we don't see all that much in comics right now, where you go on Kickstarter and everybody has at least some conflict that is direct, and this is almost completely indirect conflict.
Yeah. Um, I think it just came from my love of the newspaper comics. Because I mean, they were able to tell such complete stories. I mean, Calvin and Hobbes, Peanuts, Garfield, all of those. The reason why, I can throw out those names or those, and people know about them, even though Calvin and Hobbes hasn't run for 30 years. You know, there was just a gravity towards what the cartoonists, were able to put in their comics, and like everyone knows about Garfield, and Jim Davis hasn't been writing or illustrating Garfield in years. He's got a whole company that's dedicated to producing work for him, but it's still Garfield. Um, and I just wanted to, make something that would get people uh, a break, have some humor, have some um, things that they could detach from the problems of the real world, even before the pandemic, not have to think about your job or, what stress you have going on. Just here's a 15-30 second break for you. Um, and it was all about making it inclusive. So something that kids could read, that adults could read. And, one of my first comics, one of my first shows I did, I had a kid that was maybe 10 walk up to me when I was first pitching it. And he goes, "Oh, so is this like something in Goodfellas where you have a guy putting his head in a vice and the eyeball's going to pop out?" And I'm like, "No, you're not going to find that in my stuff." And he turned around and left. I'm like, "All right."
That's kind of messed up in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, and that's when I was playing with pitches. I was like, it's Goodfellas meets Looney Tunes. It's these kind of things. And then I'm like, all right, let me refine it. Let me make it, The Godfather. That's more of a refined mobster movie that everyone knows if they know mobster culture. And
So let's even talk a little bit about, because we're going to dive into sort of what Volume 4 deals with in a second here. But one of the things that's super interesting as well is that this was definitely more on the webtoon side of things. It was more weekly, and it was 4 panels, and that's something that's also very different than other books, because you back Kickstarters, I back Kickstarters, and sometimes I'm waiting anywhere from 4 to 6 months for 32 to 36 pages. And then I got to wait another bunch of time. And in that process between issues one, two, and three, it's 18 months out. But if you're doing something every single week, you can build up an audience that way, on top of the fact that, consistency is there. And it's also the idea that you're doing only 4 panels and it only takes me legitly a minute at most to read it. And so, what was that like for you? Because that also changes the game, because you're hitting a different demographic completely. And you're also not reliant on people having to wait. Because if you're doing it, and I'm trying to do the math, if it's 4 months, that's four times, well, I'm really bad at math. That's 16 weeks, right? On the short end. That means that you're doing 16 installations of a book compared to one person doing one installation. And that
yeah,
definitely changes the way things are marketed, as well as doing a web comic to some degree is cheaper as well.
yeah. I mean, I'm a one man show, so I mean, I research, I write, I illustrate, I, you know, design all my books. I lay everything out. The only thing I don't do in house is print the stuff. But I um, Yeah, I've been doing the comic since 2012. It was twice a week for the first 3 years. Um, and then once I moved to Chicago, I backed it off to one time a week. And then I kind of went in cycles. So I would do a big chapter and go for several months. And then I would take a break and I would do more like daily one off strips. Um, and then it wasn't until October of 2016 that I had put my first book out, um, in which is a full length comic collection and more like a trade. And that was called Meet the Family. It's on my it's on my online store. I have it. Currently, it's not involved with this Kickstarter because I wanted to kind of segregate the based on a true story and my other comics. But you can pick it up on Amazon or on my uh, online store from my website. Um, and with that book, it was 132 pages, full color. Over 250 comics were in that issue. I had a book exclusive chapter that you won't find anywhere else, as well as a bunch of extra fun stuff. And with that, like I had probably 90% of the book already done. It was just a matter of compiling it all together. So the nice thing about the way I've worked is I've got a huge library of assets. So I work in vector. So I've got Illustrator files. I've got thousands of Illustrator files. And I can literally pull, a background from 3 years ago, a look or a glance from a character in this position, a menu, a martini glass, and just kind of copy and paste things and rearrange with panels now. So as long as I'm not creating new characters, new scenes, if I've got the dialogue written or at least a rough outline, I can knock out a new comic in an hour. Or and
So
that's
even talk about this because I love the idea of speeding things up. I love the idea of recycling content, and I love the idea of also remonetizing content in a way. And so, what is that like for you? Because now that you have the vast library, you've drawn all of these characters in a variety of ways. Or let's say that you haven't drawn a character in a particular way, but you've drawn the other 70% of it, then you could just bang out that drawing and place it into that position.
yep,
And that's a big game changer in a lot of ways because now you're able to recycle and do something a lot faster, cheaper, more efficiently. And it also allows you to have you either can do more, you could do it faster, or it doesn't cost you as much money to do it, which means that you could pass that costs downward onto whoever's supporting you because you need less to support you. And what is that like? Because that's a big game changer at this point. And also having that big library is also efficient as well on the other side, because then monetization of big libraries is a really big thing right now.
yeah. I mean, it's definitely been a at first when I was doing it, because I mean, I was doing graphic design before I started my comics. And I was always about reusing. Um, I was doing programming, and it's all about reusing code and being more efficient that way and not reinventing the wheel. So, like, when I first started illustrating, I was sketching characters and I've got a whole notebook. I've got notebooks full of you know Dust Bunny sketches and brainstorming and different things, um, storyboards and stuff like that. But it got to a point where I was like, okay, this is good, but I know that I'm a digital artist, and so like I can do I'm still pretty good, but I'm not as good and I can't do it as well as going digital. So like I'll offer, I'll do a sketch in most full length books when I get, um, commissioned at a show. I'll do a sketch of a character in it or something, and that's a 30-second, minute long ordeal. No big deal. Um, but my strength comes in being able to zoom in 800% and tweak something if you know the side eye isn't looking right or something like that. But the nice thing is having that ability. um, and the first couple of years I almost felt um, like imposter syndrome because I was doing this digital stuff and I had this whole library and I'm talking with other indie comics that are like, oh yeah, I'm working on this and I've got 10 different strips that I've sketched. Now I need to ink them and then I have to wait for them to dry and then I can go in and color them and different things. And I'm like, I can do 10 strips in, a weekend. And that's from sketch to fully illustrated and ready to publish because I can pick a piece and reuse it. And I was like, there must be something wrong with my process. Until a couple of years ago, someone's like, you're doing it like you're copying like movies and or like Broadway and stuff, where it's like you have props, you have this extensive background, and you're just pulling from a library of stuff that you created. You shouldn't feel bad about that. I was like, huh.
So let me ask a question, and we're gonna dive into this because I think it's so interesting how comics are created, and I think so many people, I obviously create my podcast and I speak to a lot of other podcasters, and we all have different ideas on how things are done. There is a template I use now. After almost 450 interviews, there is a template that works, and it leads me down a certain path and into a certain interview style. But do you feel like you're cheating, or do you say, hey, if I could do something faster, why not? And I already created all this stuff, because it does change the comic in a certain way if you're not hand drawing everything. But at the same time, if you already created something, I would imagine it's kind of like if you created beats on one song and you built out the entire melody, and then you could take a piece of that and then just expand it into another song, and you could save yourself work. It's why wouldn't you do that in a lot of ways too? So what is that like for you? Because I would imagine it must be a little conflicting, but at the same time, you're like, fuck it, I'm saving myself hours upon hours of work, and I can go do something more fun, or I can produce more content, or I could actually spend time now diving deeper into research.
Yeah. Nowadays, I don't worry about it because it's my process and I'm comfortable with it. And you know, I'll tell people, I'll tell other artists, I'll tell, you know, I work digitally and I work in vector. And half the fun of vector is you can scale things and you can also reuse them. And so it is what it is. And um, unless I get to a point where I want to start, working with a different tablet in a different medium, that may change my process. But right now, I'm good with what it is. And yeah, I mean, I still have my.
So you enjoy cheating as the mobsters enjoy cheating the government. Is that what this is about?
I found a way to be faster at it, so I don't see any reason. And if people enjoy it, why do I need to? You know, it's going to be worse if I try and freehand something. It's going to take twice, three, four times as long for me to do that. And I mean,
This is so interesting because I'm not an artist, and so I find this all interesting. I don't know anything about vector. I can barely function on Photoshop. I am mediocre at best. I am good at Canva and Be Funky, which are just online softwares, and I know how to play with colors and all sorts of stuff. And I know how to modify it so that I could take an image and then I could transform the image. But again, I'm not going to pretend and say that I'm an artist by nature. You know, I have a artistic skill made for podcasting. So
so when you're saying Canva, I'm familiar with that. I've used it from time to time. In the same way that you can reuse designs, you can duplicate something, you can switch out the backgrounds. That's essentially what I'm doing, except I'm doing it in Illustrator as opposed to Photoshop. Photoshop's raster, everything, you have layers, but it comes out flat um, at the end. Illustrator with vector, everything's on different layers and you can group things together. So I can literally pull out a character like, I've got the hat rack behind me. If I was to illustrate that, I could go in and with Photoshop, it's all different layers, but you're painting it on essentially, and you're adding depth by how you color it. But in Illustrator, I could go in and I could grab the gray hat behind it, that the gray hat on the bottom, and I could literally pull that out and rotate it, move it on to another character or whatever, and it would still have the stuff behind it. So it'd have all the other hats, and I could just pull out a piece of it and move it into another file. So
Oh, again, I'm not an artist. I'm sure plenty of other artists know about this, and I'm not going to press because I am completely out in the middle of the ocean on this question. But I just find it fascinating because everybody works differently, and again, there's a reason why I'm not an artist. I don't have that skill set, and I've learned that I am not blessed with that skill set. There are plenty of other things I know how to do. Everybody, I just want to make that crystal clear. Drawing, art, learning vector, drawing a hat or painting on a hat is not going to be one of my skill sets. I'm going to just quit while I'm ahead before I embarrass myself. But I do want to actually talk about the series a little bit. And obviously, you have Meet the Family, and that's pretty big, but that's not in this campaign. And then I don't think The Blind Tiger is also, which is sort of another sequel that focuses on another group of characters. Obviously, is a little bit separate outside of this, but they're out there, and if people want those books, they can easily get them pretty much on your website, Amazon, anywhere where books are sold. I'm sure that if you have a bookstore that's anywhere competent, they could probably order it to some degree. And if they can't, just Amazon and you'll be fine. Worst case scenario. But I do want to talk about what's going on, which is what your Kickstarter is focused on, which is, based on a true story and Dust Bunny Mafia. And obviously you have Volume 1, which deals with Al Capone and Jimmy Hoffa and a variety of other characters. And then you're also dealing with Frank Costello and Jack Dranga and Vincent Chin Gigante and Santono Trafecchia Jr., I want to say. I'm not going to say the name right.
Yeah,
everybody can make fun of me for that. That's a tough one.
I'm gonna say I don't remember sending you that one.
I pulled deep. I did my homework. This is volume
you
3.
did.
Yeah, clearly. So obviously there's a bunch of gangsters is what's going on with this book, and obviously I think Jimmy's in this book, Chant Burke is in this book, Bugsy Siegel or Ben Bugsy Siegel is in this book, Lucky Luciano, which is Vegas, Kiss the Ring, right? The entire thing where everybody used to kiss Lucky's ring. And so, and then there's Tony the Ant, the guy who's behind Casino. So what was this like really building out all of these books? Because there's a lot of mobsters, there's a lot of mob stories, and there's really a plethora of things to pick from.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost, how do you...
Brett, do you have a problem? Of
course not. My wife might say otherwise.
It's all right. It's all right. This is a safe space. You're among friends. We don't judge.
Yeah, my true crime bookshelf has doubled over the before pandemic till now, to the point where pretty much if I've got a book on my wish list for family, friends, Christmas, holidays, things like that, it's pretty much given that it's a mobster book. But yeah, something that's been really interesting and really fun for me is digging into the true crime community. So like I've been reading these books by these different true crime authors. I've been listening to true crime podcasts and different things. But once I started doing the Based on a True Story, I started posting in these Facebook groups. And then like some of the different organizers would reach out to me and ask, hey, do you have a shirt for any of this kind of stuff and different things? And so that kind of inspired me. And then now, I've gone on, a couple podcasts. I'm talking with the podcast hosts. They support my Kickstarter. I support their projects, now and again. I've been talking with a couple people about, I can basically freely share these comics and stuff in that, and then I'll get, positive responses from people in the true crime community that are hosts and speakers and authors.
Let's even talk about that a little bit, because obviously, when you really start niching down into true crime and a variety of other areas, in particular, true crime, those people are what I like to call true believers, where they will spend thousands upon thousands of dollars, and they thoroughly enjoy this. There's probably true crime conventions, there's memorabilia, there's like special merch. I'm sure that there's top true crime podcasts. And also, I would imagine there are experts, whether they're official experts or unofficial experts. And so, what is this like? Because I would imagine that at some point when you're doing research, you're like, something's not adding up in this book, for instance, or in this mobster's story. Or you say, okay, I need an idea. And it's that too, right? Because
Yep.
when you're doing 600, 700, 800 stories, it's going to get to a point where you run out of an idea. Or maybe you don't have the complete story, or maybe you want an expert opinion in. So, what is that like to really have that as a resource? Because it's invaluable in a lot of ways, right?
Oh yeah, and especially now with the age of information, you know, I'm lucky that I'm doing it now with the internet and with the fact that I can send an email to a retired uh, Kansas City detective who worked organized crime in the 70s and 80s and who's now a podcast host who's done 300 episodes or something like that for the past 5 to 7 years. And I can be like, hey Gary, you mentioned on your podcast episode X in this part, would you mind giving me I actually did that a couple of months ago. I did one of the um, one of the comics in the book talked about a hospital that was used in Chicago, that mobsters kind of reserved rooms from time to time to lay low, and they would basically have the run of the place. It was a special room on a certain floor, and people knew not to go there unless there was only one or two doctors assigned to that area, and they would bring in women, they would bring in their friends, they would order food, they'd do gambling nights and all kind of stuff, and you know, they would turn cops away at the door, being like, "This is a hospital. You can't touch. You can't go up there unless you have, you know, a, you don't have the, required documentation and stuff like that." And at that point, I'm like, I heard that on a podcast. It sounded really interesting, and I reached out to the host. I said, "Hey Gary, can you send me the newspaper article that you got this from?" And he's like, "Oh, of course." And within you know, an hour or two, I had the full story of what he based his podcast on, and then I could deep dive into that. And, you know, and then the nice thing is, he scratched my back, I scratch his. So when I go and I start promoting the comic and stuff, I tell people, if you want to hear more about this, go to Gary's website. Here's the podcast. I tag him in the socials. He shares it. I share it. And just kind of extends the brand.
Because I was even going to ask about that as well, where it's obvious, I'm hitting a very niche, and I have another project that is definitely comic book investing, and that hits a certain niche as well. It also answers a question. And so the audience is somewhat built in, where do you want to invest in comic books is the question, or do you want to make money with comics? And people say, okay, I'm curious now. And where you have is you're not necessarily answering a question per se, but you're giving a new spin, a new interpretation on people who already love these products and love this idea and say, okay, I just want to see it in a new light. Because sometimes somebody says, I've already seen, the Gotti family beat the shit out of somebody. I don't need to see it again. But what if we see the story being told in, I don't want to say
By a
necessarily,
rat.
but like a rat and a chicken are having a discussion about whacking somebody, for lack of a better word, Oh, I'm not monetized on YouTube, guys, so it's all right. Um, but anyhow, I have to say that. But what is that like? Because it clearly, definitely hits an itch and scratches that position.
Yeah, I mean, it's just yeah, I don't even know how to answer that
Do you need 30 seconds? I
eloquently.
could play an ad if you need to think.
um, yeah,
I'll play the ad. I got no problem playing my ad.
play the ad.
So obviously I have many sponsors. It's Cowabunga Comics, and I'm gonna go let Brett think about his question. We'll be back in like 35 seconds, everybody. Well, I did give you 30 seconds, and that's Kyle's shop down in Florida, Cowabunga Comics. The link's in the description. They got a bunch of really cool variants. They have a Department of Truth variant, so it actually is an awesome variant. I don't know if it actually came out this month or if it's coming out next month, but it looks dope from what I've seen. So go shop at his shop, guys. You can order offline. They'll ship anywhere in the world. And they got a bunch of CGC books as well, and they got some really cool merch. So anyway, I did give you time to think. So and I
Yeah,
like to get paid. I just want to clarify that. I absolutely want to get paid. So,
well, of course. Um, yeah, I mean, it's just been a lot of fun taking both, figures that people know, Al Capone, Lucky Luciano, Bugsy Siegel, and being able to adapt them into my characters, into putting them into, I'm poking fun at, these larger than life characters um, because I find them fascinating. I would never endorse, what they did or anything, but it's a fascinating, why do people watch reality TV? Why do people, you know, binge the things that they do? And I mean, it's the same thing with this mobster stuff. I love these stories. I love uh, the fact that people were get away with some of these ridiculous, you know, heists that they were able to do. The fact that they had the guts to, in the 70s, a bunch of jewel thieves thought that they could steal from one of the outfit bosses who lived in River Forest, which is a swanky part of Chicago suburb, and they literally thought that they could steal while the boss was on vacation. They stole like thousands of dollars worth of jewelry from his safe, and all four of the five thieves that were involved in it, after they were told to give it back, they brought him the heist stuff. They got killed in succession, and it's like, who does that? Who actually thinks that I'm going to steal from a boss and get away with it, and end up without any consequence? So
yeah, no, it's mob stories and crime in general is very, very fascinating, and in particular, organized crime is such an interesting topic. And obviously, there's been an evolution, and I think you're still really playing with these larger than life characters, but it's something that obviously the mob is still around. It's just evolved in a lot of ways. And there's a lot of stuff that also can be played out. There's people from the 90s and the 80s and the 70s, and there's just such a huge position. And also, one of the things that you can do, and you start to do it, is that you don't have to keep somebody in the 1950s per se. Or what you also have done is that you've sort of separated it too, where you have based on a true story, but then you have Meet the Family, you have, the entire story with, and I'm just getting the name, the Blind Tiger, which also deals with sort of separate things, and then it's also all over, the U.S. And that's something that's just very, very cool that you've done as well. That you've separated things, but you could also fuse it all together if you would like.
Yeah, that's one thing I really wanted to do. So like everything in my universe is connected. Um, and I love the idea of, you know, the multiverse and like I don't feel like I'll ever get to, the size of, you know, the Marvel or DC or whatever. But the fact that everything in my universe ties together. So you can pick up an anthology I'm a part of, from like I've done stuff with the Heroes Initiative charity, for a couple of years with, um, some of their, collaborative books and different things. And you can read a story in that that's 4 pages featuring the Dust Bunnies and some of their, um, adventures, and the same characters will filter through into these other comics. And I just like the idea of building something and having all these things that tie in. So, like the first anthology I was a part of when I was pretty nameless as an indie comic was called Forgotten, was called Unlawful Good. And it was a crime anthology, put out by Heather Antos, who ended up, working on Star Wars and Deadpool, was an editor at Marvel for a while, um, and then worked for Source Point Press, I believe, for a couple years. And I did some like fake advertisements, and that was like my first break into, um, comics, and that was not just my web comic. And I did an ad for guns. I did an ad for, you know, like a van that had been previously used in a hit and that kind of stuff. And that's one of my earliest, non uh, non concentrated to my normal storyline stuff, but yet it ties in and it fits with, the world that I've been building with the Mobables, with the based on true story. So
So to even talk about that, because obviously, DC, Marvel, they have big worlds. IDW, to some degree, has a sort of non-canon fusion world with some of their stuff. Um, and big worlds are fun in a lot of ways. It's always fun to have crossovers. It's always fun to have an event in comics because events do sell books and things that happen and deaths and crises, for lack of a better word. Final Crisis, Infinite Crisis, multiple crises on Earth. All that stuff does sell books, but there also gets to a point where it's nice to have a self-contained story as well and say, hey, look, this could be in this world, but it's not, and it's taking place outside of this world and it's its own world and it doesn't interfere because there is a lot of fusion going on. I'm a big Zenoscope reader and they're combining their world and it's going to reach critical mass at some point, and something big is going to come out of critical mass with Zenoscope, and they've set the ball in motion. And so what is that like for you, knowing that parts of this is still intact but it's also still separate, where there's a lot of chains that need to be linked still?
I mean, I enjoy the fact, that it is a world on its own. And I mean, most of the links that I have to the outside, are actually in the webcomic, in the indie, comic sphere. So, like, I'll have, guest appearances from other indie comics and different things that'll show up in mid story, and I'll put a description in the books or on the website about, hey, check out this comic who, um, I featured early on in the first couple books. There was a character named Pirate Mike who was basically this pirate, this modern day pirate, that lived in the suburbs because he got tired of uh, the greed and the treachery and the rambunctiousness, and so he retired and now is living in suburban America. And I had him show up in a couple strips, and it was perfect because it blended this, um, webcomic community, but also fit with the storyline of he ends up being this costume like, mascot of a Chuck E. Cheese essentially, um, and he's forced to deal with uh, customer service and things that he doesn't care about as a pirate. But he needs to earn a paycheck now, and he shows up, and it's just tied in beautifully as a no. I'm going to throw off the cops. I'm going to send them this other way and hide them from the bootlegging that's going on in the background for my Dust Bunny pals. And um, yeah, I mean, that was just a fun way to introduce my readers to another comic that I enjoyed um, back when I did that strip and I had it in a couple books. Um, I actually did a couple shows with the creator of Pirate Mike and was able to, refer people and be like, hey, if you enjoyed my book, check out, my friend Brad, who did this Pirate Mike, who showed up in several strips. He's at this table, at the same show. And it was just, fun to bring in your friends and do uh, little things like that that are Easter eggs for the people, you know, following the community.
Yeah, no, I enjoy my Easter eggs in books, and I appreciate when things like that happen. So I appreciate Easter eggs. I appreciate, finding things and references to other things that are going on in books. And I enjoy when indie creators throw nice things in there. And I like to sort of want to throw things into eventually when I do a book. If I ever get around to it, it's going to be a lot of Easter eggs. And people are going to be pleasantly surprised. And there might be some that people can buy in, which is always fun too. But that's a whole different ballgame. And I have a half and half opinion on that because it gets tricky when you're drawing people into your book. And technically, they should get a credit if they design a character, and that's just it's a pain in the ass. But I digress. That's a different interview and podcast completely. Um, that's going to be a fun episode. My Andrew versus the drawing tier on Kickstarter. That's going to be a fun episode when I get around to doing that episode. Um, but yeah, no, it's something that's very interesting, and obviously I appreciate when indie books sort of combine and then they also shoot out because it bumps up sales in a lot of ways. But I do want to talk about also, I mean, obviously this book covers a lot of stuff and it's a bunch of more strips that you've done and it's going through a bunch of gangsters and mobsters and organized crime to the T. And it sort of just picks up where issues volumes 1, 2, and 3 left off in a lot of ways and just continues a lot of that. But you don't need to read volume 3 to understand volume 4, from my
Yep.
understanding. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
What were you saying?
no, I was just agreeing with you. I was finishing. Uh, yeah. This is kind of like an anthology of sorts. So, you don't have to pick up volume one to pick up volume two, three, or four. Um, the same cast of characters, the dust bunnies, the rats, the crows, all these anthropomorphic, animals show up and the world looks similar, but you don't necessarily need to read Meet the Family or The Blind Tiger to know what's going on.
Yeah, and one of the things that you do, because I do want to talk about rewards, is that obviously you offer a digital volume of volume 4, or everything can be picked up digitally. So you can get everything from, volume 4, or if you say, hey, I love this concept, you get everything digitally and it's relatively affordable. Then you can get everything physical, or you can just get volume 4 physical. And then you do some cooler stuff as well, where you have an underboss digital commission with a physical book. So obviously you're going to draw somebody a digital commission, which is kind of cool, and it's just a different way how to do it. And then also there is I think you can make a cameo at some point, unless all that's already been sold. But I know that was on the table in the book as an underboss. And then there's also, this sold out. So I'm assuming for volume 5, you're going to probably offer it as well. But it's design a character for the poker chip. And because you've done, I think, poker chip, you've done playing cards before. And so, what is that like that the poker chip thing sold out and somebody said, hey, I want that entire thing with, that. So, yeah.
Yeah. So it's been great. It's been really supportive. The nice thing is, I did build this audience for several years before I even um, thought about doing a Kickstarter, and I had been, working my way through, going to shows, different things like that. And then by the time I launched the Kickstarter, I was like, I had actually, I've been thinking a lot about the different branding and things that would be cool. And I found a place that made poker chips, and you could order a small run of them. And I'm like, all right, I'm doing Based on True Story Volume 1. Bugsy Siegel is a big character of mine. I'm turning him into literally a seagull. Let's, let's see how this plays out, see if people like it. And I've started making, for the most part, these poker chips an exclusive to Kickstarter. I've only done um, one run of them where I didn't make them uh, tied to a Kickstarter. I did it for a convention earlier this year, um, but they're actually offered as add-ons to future campaigns because I thought mobsters, casinos, playing cards, poker, you know, what's something that I would often see, people would take home a poker chip from different casinos they've visited back in the day or things like that. It's a nice little souvenir you can put in your pocket. You can play with it, fidget with it, kind of thing. And
And so
so,
to even talk beyond that, though, it's the idea that somebody sort of got to design it, and that somebody was so interested because I know a lot of people love poker in the United States and in the world, but also somebody's like, hey, I want every person to basically be able to get this or back it or have the ability. And I want everybody to have my design. And so, what was that like? Because it's also a sign that you're doing something correct in a lot of ways, where somebody is willing to spend on a higher end tier to sort of get that and then have some control with their character they want. Obviously, you get the final say in it, but there's a lot of sort of cool things and with that to some degree.
yeah,
And it's a sign of confidence is really what it is.
yeah. A nice benefit is that, so this is the eighth campaign I've run that's successful. I've done one other that wasn't, but I was able to retool it and launch it in a few weeks afterwards with a lower goal. And I was able to fund that one. But for the most part, I've offered a commission essentially on the poker chip for about half the campaigns, and it always goes so far. Um, and the nice thing for me is I've done these, anthropomorphic characters for so long that people don't expect me to draw humans, which I'm fine with. Which is why you'll never see, for the most part, a human show up in my world. I have more fun drawing animals and other creatures. Um, and so, yeah, I've been uh, surprised. Volume 3 and Volume 4 both funded in under 48 hours of launching. And generally speaking, the commission tiers, for the most part, go quickest. Um, and unless I have some, early bird special where it's, throwing a pin or throwing a keychain with the comic, and I limit it to 5 or 10 booklets. But yeah, I mean, it's just nice to know that even though my art is, I mean, it's very unique, um, but it's still reminiscent of Hanna-Barbera and, you know, Chuck Avery and the different 50s, 60s golden era of like cartoons. So it's throwback to that, but it's like I'm not doing these highly detailed, super intricate, you know, macho superheroes or anything like that, but yet people still enjoy them and are willing to spend some extra money
It's
for a
also
commission.
the idea that one of the things that gives you an advantage over some other people who do comics is that you're the writer and the artist. And I use Tyler Carpenter. I don't know if you know who Tyler Carpenter is.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people know who Tyler is, and he's a good example where he is the artist and the writer on the book. And when you're both the artist and the writer, you can offer a commission tier but if I'm the writer, I can't offer a commission tier unless my artist agrees to it. Now, sometimes you have a Kickstarter where the writer and the artist are on the same team and they own 50% of the intellectual property, but it's the idea that, and the artist says, yeah, I'll do some commissions. But that also gives you a real advantage where you can offer a commission as something, and that's a game changer in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It's very helpful, but it's also the idea that also I think people are just sick and tired of superhero stuff right now, and I think it's evident because if I want a superhero book at this stage, I can go to my Barnes and Noble and pick up any superhero book I want, and I think that's why people are coming to indie is that they're sick and tired of the same stuff over and over again, and it's kind of like do I want to read a realistic book about mobsters, or do I want to read something that is saying I'm not too sure if this is going to be my cup of tea, but it's different. And maybe it's going to be entertaining. Or somebody like me says, I want something that's less serious. And I think that that's also the shift why you're doing well with this.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that's definitely I've noticed is I do really well when I'm going to shows when it's not in my element. So like when I go to a Comic Con, I have to hustle harder than most people, but I brand everything. So like you've probably seen it because we're friends on social media, but like when you come to my table, I've got the for the most part the red and white checkered tablecloth, like the Italian restaurants back in the day. I want to make you feel like you're stepping back into those, like into the Godfather, into the Casino movie. And so I want it to be an experience. So like I'm in a fedora that matches my brand, I'm in a shirt that ties into based on a true story or my comics. And it's like you see I've got an old briefcase that I'll use as a prop. Everything matches the theme. But I also don't just get random people that will necessarily walk by and pick up my books because they'll see Meet the Family, they'll see based on a true story, but it doesn't hook them the same way as a horror comic or print walls do necessarily. But if I can actually engage with someone and give them um, one of my bookmarks or one of my other freebies, like I have in my business cards, I have a confidential envelope, and it's a little like coin envelope that I stamp with a confidential stamp, and that has my business card in it. And when I hand that to people, that it takes them a minute and they look up at the banner and then they're like, oh, this is clever, and then I can get into my pitch and actually tell them about my stuff. But for the most part, I'm not going to get people just walking by and be like, unless they know about me, no one's going to search me out.
Yeah, see. I have a massively different solution, and I believe in what is known as a blue ocean strategy. Where I'm looking for little to no competition, and I want to basically find a whole new place to play and dominate the space, and then eliminate my competition systematically. And people, when they watch this, you could say I'm mean, I'm cruel, or whatever. That's fine. Um, and I have a whole different set of strategies that I purposely have utilized that have worked in the last 10 years, and there's continuously working, and people don't see what they do until it's 2 3 years out. So you look at my YouTube views, that's not the play. And when I get criticized for it, I'm like, you could criticize me, but maybe you shouldn't criticize me for certain things. You don't know what the play is per se, because the play is legitimately going to happen in 2 months from now. And when I do 100,000 downloads in the first 3 months on iTunes and in podcast format, well, I'll be laughing to the bank. And the people who criticize me, you can come work for me. But I think you're hitting the niche where you're definitely targeting a blue ocean strategy, because it's very hard to compete with a sexy print wall unless you have a different hook, and unless you want to outperform that sexy print position or go massively exclusive or go variant artist and a variety of other entities or strategies, then you need to really do what you're doing, which is saying, I'm finding a place where nobody's playing, and somebody's going to stop and say, "What's this?"
Yeah, and actually in 2020 when things reopened, I took that strategy and I was like, I do fine at, you know, comic shows and I do fine at library shows and stuff, but I started doing craft fairs and I started doing art festivals at local breweries and different things like that. And it was different. And I actually made more money doing like a neighborhood art walk that was like an art gallery that was held in garages in one of the neighborhoods. And that was my best show to date, was that basically, you know, if you would take a gallery and put it in a garage. And that's what I did. And I've done that past couple of years and it's been amazing for me. And it's not, you know, I'm one of two comic artists out of 50 or 60 artists that are there, and they're doing everything from ceramics to pottery and, fine photography, fine art photography. And then it's like, and you've got a comic artist. What are they doing here? But yet people show up.
People attack me for what I've done in the show I've set up, but there's a reason why, and I know exactly what I'm doing. And again, it's working, and so that's all I'm going to say on that front. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I think people don't get and understand how to build things out. And I think a lot of people leave money on the table in comics. I really do, and I get criticized for a lot of ideas, and I'm like, oh, you know what? Is the market determines everything, and that's my solution. I'm a free market guy, and the free market will determine what somebody is worth and what they're doing. But we don't have to go into all of that. Obviously, you got a bunch of other stuff too. I mean, you got playing cards, you got trading cards, you got shirts, you got a plethora merch, you got a vast bounty of merch, for lack of a better word here. And so, yeah, and a lot of this stuff, I don't know if it's on the Kickstarter, but I know it's on your website. So pretty much anybody that anything wants, for the most part, can either be found on this Kickstarter or on your website.
Yep.
So there's a lot of stuff going on, but I do want to back out of this entire thing. We did talk about conventions, but I am curious where you foresee in reference to cons, because obviously things are now opening up in 2022 again, and cons are happening. But where do you see cons going as far as selling and even being a place to sell comics? Because, and this is my thought, is that a lot of people have not gone to cons. They might have money and they might want to be going after the big names. And it's always been that way at cons. But do you feel that there's been a shift where it's now you can go digital, and that maybe being online and having a bigger digital footprint and having a better website and actually doing more virtual cons and interviews and running Facebook ads is more of a selling point? Or do you still think cons are the dominating force?
That's a tough one. It really depends on um, where your audience is at. I mean, one of the big things I do is I've got a mailing list. And so if someone comes to my website, then I've got a button on there that I've had for years that says join the mafia. And it links you to my mailing list. You put in your email and I spam you like once a month, except when I'm running a Kickstarter. And then I do it, as I'm doing different updates and things like that. Um, but for the most part, I try and drive people there. And after each campaign that I do, I try and funnel them back to um, my, landing page to get them on my newsletter so they can stay up to date on what I'm doing. Um, and so, like, that was a big thing that I started doing that when I was going to cons. I had different incentives, get a free sticker, get a free button, different things like that. Sign up for my mailing list and, get one of these freebies. All you have to do is exchange an email. Um, but I definitely think it really depends on kind of what your end game is. I always enjoy being with people. And even though I'm an introvert by nature, I enjoy getting out from behind the desk and actually interacting, especially with people that like the true crime and like the mobster stuff, and being able to talk with them, because that's not the general population for the most part when people are going to comic cons or literary fests or whatever. It's very niche, um, for the true crime or even the comics aspect if you're flipping locations. So getting out with talking with people that have the same passion is just a nice breath of fresh air, and it helps, kind of revive me from sitting behind a desk, being immersed in my world. And so, like, I'm always going to find shows, um, as long as I can. And I mean, it's a hobby for me. I've got a full time day job. This is just something fun. Um, but I have been fortunate enough to actually, make a little bit of a profit on it and make my, Kickstarters pay for, some future tables and things like that. And I have stock to sell. But I mean, I'm always going to be looking for actual in person events where you can connect with people face to face. Podcasts are different. These interviews, the live streams have been great for networking and for great for the industry, and getting my name out there, I feel like. But the actual virtual shows, I've yet to actually find one and be a part of one that really has the same feel, has the same. Uh,
For virtual shows are complicated, and what I've heard, and I haven't been invited to one, and I know why I haven't been invited to one because I'm not a creator, and the insight I probably could provide would be helpful, but that's neither here nor there. Um, but I've heard just they're not the same feel, and they're even not the same selling point, and it's just rough. It's rough, and it's also some of this stuff is recorded, but it doesn't do well in
mhm.
replay. Like I my some of my interviews on YouTube have gotten like 10, 12,000 views over the course of 8 months. And that has a lot of replay value. And even when I reshoot out my interviews and you see me tagging you all the time, a lot of replay values, even if your Kickstarter is not running. And virtual cons just don't have that same feel.
Of
And
course.
it's unfortunate because they could if it was done correctly.
Yeah, I mean, I actually was talking with a friend the other day, and that, this is not related in the same scope, but the same thing applies. So I had recently had an interaction where the company that I buy most of my fedoras from, was not going to honor, a like stamp card that I had accumulated over 10, 15 years.
How dare they?
I know. Um, but they basically said that with the pandemic and different things, they've gone a lot more robust with their online store. They've had to shutter, some of their different in person stores and relocate to different areas and things like that. And so they had built up a stamp card where if you purchased, 10 hats from them, they would give you a stamp and you get a, certain amount of credit towards your next hat. But it had to be in person at a store. And where I'm at, there used to be a store before the pandemic. Now there's not a store. And the closest location's like 500 miles away. So I'm not going to go there on average and just drop by and walk in and, um, and just kind of browse their hats, try things on. But half the fun of the actual stores was going in and trying on these hats, seeing what was new, what was available. Does this fit?
We are
You
so
know,
different. We are so different.
but uh, and like when I lived in LA, I had one of those hat stores that was pretty much down the street from me. So I would drop in once a week or so. I would hardly ever buy anything, but I would at least drop in for the experience of trying something new. And like they were totally on brand. They would do whiskey, complimentary whiskey tastings when they were showing off new hats and different things like that. But nowadays, with this, long story short, um, there was a time where they weren't going to honor the hat that I had finished the cart, and I wasn't going. And so I told someone, it's like I they eventually agreed to honor it, and I got a hat last week. But I'm like, I'm probably not going to visit one of their stores for the foreseeable future, just because proximity. There's nothing within 500 miles of me. I'm not going to make an easy, I'm not necessarily going to be visiting a location that has a store. And it's not the same to go online, browse their website versus, you know,
See, I've come to the position where I've become practical. And this is what COVID did to me is I've become a very practical individual. So if I could buy comics virtually, and there's a virtual comic where I could get everything I want, and then I could flip some of that stuff and make money on it, that's what I've become. And I want more of that because it makes my life better. And I've gotten into now where it's fun to go to a comic store. And don't get me wrong, it's fun hunting for books. And you go into the comic store with $30 and the game is what can you walk out with more than $30 but pay less than 30 is the game essentially. And it's fun to do that. But I'm also at the stage where I'm just like, whatever's practical works for me too. And that's where I'm at is if I have 800 comic books and I have an eBay store that works, I have distribution and I have clients that I know are going to want. I know my clients because there's clients who buy from me repeatedly every month. And so I'm at the stage now where I'm like, well, from a business standpoint, I have a practical position. So that's how I feel about cons is that why would I pay for a hotel, food, table, and spend the next 32 hours over my weekend when I can legitly sip beer, play video games, and pack up books that I'm selling on eBay that costs me the postage and I'm making 10 to 12 bucks per book on it, per book, and I'm shipping out 20 of them. Why would I go to a con at that point? Like cons are fun, don't get me wrong, but if I'm there for business, practicality doesn't make any sense. And if all my clients are on eBay and they're like, oh, you got this great cover, and then you share the cover out on Instagram, but you only sell through one distribution method purposely, and you're driving everybody to point X. So that's how I feel. It's and I know I've just committed a cardinal sin in the entire comic world, and people already hate me enough. So this isn't going to change anything.
I mean, we agreed to disagree. That's cool. I mean, when it comes to me and my, business model, I want to be with people. I feel like I can make a better connection with people actually explaining my stuff. And so I love Kickstarter, and it has definitely afforded me the ability to order things, more in
Ooh,
bulk.
I don't disagree about interviews where doing a virtual interview for me and when I have a book, that's what is going to sell the story. But I'm talking about strict variants where the thing that sells a variant is that cover looks awesome and I want it. There's no words that need to be said at that point.
Yep.
Where it's either if you have, I'll drop a name, if you have a Sun Kumanaki cover, that's the end of the discussion. Somebody's like, I know that cover. What's your book? Don't care. And that's how I am with variants too. And so that's the business model versus if I want somebody to read my cover A, I'll do an interview, but I want to do it virtually because I want to speak to somebody in California and then I want to speak to somebody in Connecticut too. And
Oh,
that's
of
how I
course.
feel. What?
Yeah. I mean, I've yet to, I've done a couple of variant covers for my stuff, but I feel like I'm too indie to actually have a big following. Um,
Oh, you're all wrong. But that's a separate conversation where I don't want to give my comic book consulting on air because if you would like to hear that, I will put it behind a paywall. And
yeah,
but
we'll
I'll be
talk
happy for
offline.
you.
I'm going to pick your brain offline about that.
I'm gonna pick your brain on something too, but that's not the point here. But I have a slight solution for you. Um, but I don't wanna go into all the detail because I don't want to sell that for free. I'm sorry, everybody who's watching this later on. If you would like to know that answer, you can cash at me or DM me on Twitter or Facebook, and we could set something up because I do actually consult on comic book investing, and this is in that nature. So I got no problem shilling my business out. It was actually offered on my Kickstarter, which is crazy. But yeah, but I do want to give you a chance to self promote your book and everything that you're doing because you got a lot of stuff going on.
Well, thank you. Yeah, so I've got the Kickstarter running based on a true story, volumes 1 through 4. Um, it's currently fully funded and on to stretch goals. It's ending on Wednesday, March 9th, I believe, at about 10 in the morning,
So you're not going
Central.
into Brian Polito's crosshairs then,
No.
because that's what he's launching that day.
Mm. Yeah, mine wraps up at, I think, 10 o'clock a.m. Chicago time. So don't have to worry about that. But yeah, we're fully funded, so the book's getting made. I just finished illustrating the last strip of it for the extended edition earlier this week. So I just need to actually lay out the book. But that'll all come pretty quickly because this is my 4th volume. So I know what I'm doing with that. But there's a lot of cool stuff that's still available. I've still got commission tiers. I've got add-ons for, custom whiskey glasses, like the one I've been sipping on throughout the show that has my Dust Bunny Mafia logo
That's
sandblasted on it. That's available as an add-on. I've got the cool poker chips we've been talking about. Um, every Kickstarter I do has a poker chip, and people can pick those up. I've got, trading cards like we talked about earlier as an add-on for my
you need
Mogul.
to collect the whole set, guys. The whole set.
Exactly. And actually, in a future Kickstarter, I'm doing a limited run of silver gilded cards. And so I'm going to have a kind of like a chaser per se that's only available on.
Right up my alley. I'm doing a limited 50 metal card run. That is at a Fairy Metal. So I'm really big into this stuff, and I'm a big WWE trading card guy. So I'm a big into all trading cards and stuff. And if you have some cool art and all that fun stuff, definitely like the chrome, like silver, that's like all shiny on the edges. Oh, it's just amazing.
Yep,
I'm,
I've
I'm a
got
big
actually
kid. I'm a
the
big
pack
kid.
right next to me. What was that?
I am a gigantic kid, and I got no problem admitting my problems. Like I love trading cards, metal cards, you name it. But continue. Oh, keep shilling. Just keep shilling yourself out.
Yeah, so I mean, so the Kickstarter's running for about another week, but after the campaign ends, I'm going to have a link to my store where you can pick up, some of the T-shirts I've got, to the Meet the Family, Blind Tiger, the previous volumes of Based on a True Story are all in my store. You can go on Amazon, but if you actually order through my store, I'll do a sketch in the books for you and throw in some extra goodies like stickers, things like that. Um, I've got a link tree that I'll throw in the comments after this ends where you can join my mailing list. I'm on all the major socials, so I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, um, and I've even got some exclusive. Um, I've got one poker chip that can't be found on any of my Kickstarters except if you pledge at certain levels. So I've got an exclusive poker chip that is kind of like a made members, is what I call it, loyalty level. So if you reach a certain amount of funding through my various Kickstarters, I will send you this exclusive chip. And only 25 of them were made. There's been about 10 that's been sent out previously. And that's kind of a special thing I just introduced during my last Kickstarter.
So I threw in the store in the comments. It didn't go into my Facebook group chats, but it definitely went into on the regular Facebook page as well as onto YouTube. And hopefully it showed up because Facebook is telling me I got an error. If you're listening in podcast format, I don't know what to say, but I'll include it in the notes in podcast format later on when we come in pretty much early, January of next year. I know I'm slow, guys. It's all right. I got to get through seasons 1 and 2 on the podcast front. But I digress. But yeah, you got a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, and I mean, I've got I've got more ideas for more Kickstarters coming this year. If I can work everything out, my plan is to do the next round of Mobimos trading cards, in which would include the gilded card, maybe coming this summer, and then my volume 3 of my trade paperback, called "It's Business, Not Personal." That'll fall in line with The Blind Tiger and
But
Meet the
it's always
Family.
personal. It's always personal. There is no
Well,
business without personal. I'm so sorry you gave it to me. I really want to read that book now. I really do, because it just sounds so perfect in so many ways. If there's ever a name for a whiskey, it's business, not personal. Whiskey. I'm gonna go create a whiskey company. It's business, not personal. And I'm gonna absolutely just license one of your characters to be like the mascot for it.
I'm up for it.
Oh, it'll be great. It'll be great. And then we could make like the holiday to actually have like a gift set with like the sand blasted cups, like the 2 set. That would be great. You'd sell so many of them, just so many of them. But we just couldn't kickstart it. We could kickstart the glasses, but we couldn't kickstart the whiskey because Kickstarter doesn't allow that. I don't know if Indiegogo allows it, but Indiegogo might. You never know with them.
Mm-hmm. Oh
But I
yeah,
digress.
I've got plans. I mean, I really enjoyed getting these whiskey glasses made. I plan to do one either for another limited edition, either for my based on true story trade, um, where I have my based on true story logo sandblasted on there, or the "It's Business, Not Personal" um,
So
logo put on it. So
such a good brand to throw out there. So many places you could sell that to. So many places. But I digress. And obviously though, you got a lot of stuff going on, and I'm gonna keep saying it. I've been saying it for the last 27 months. I'm gonna keep saying it. You have to support indie, and you have to support indie comic creators. And the way you do that is you actually back their Kickstarters. And what that means is that picking up a tier of any kind is very important. But let's say that money's super tight, even throwing $1 goes a long way. I've spoken about that where there was a bunch of people on my campaign who threw in $1, and I thanked a lot of them. I said, "Hey, yo, thank you for doing that. $1 goes a long way." Where it did, I obviously overfunded, but $1 can mean the difference between you funding and not funding. And I've seen it where somebody got somebody like doing like $3 and put them over like $2 over, and that $3 it would have been like $3 short. That would have been a disaster. And so dollars do count because if 50 people throw in $1, that's $50. So, but obviously, pledging is the way to do it at any tier, but every dollar counts. But also going even beyond that, sharing out Kickstarters, sharing out images of people's Kickstarters, tagging them in posts, links. If you see something you like and you have a show, mentioning it on your YouTube show, mentioning it on a podcast, reaching out to that creator for an interview, all that stuff goes a long way, and it does make a difference. And also, if you do back, let other people know that you backed, because if you back, chances are you have a friend, and it's like they might be interested. And so if you back, say, "Oh, Andrew back, let me go check out what this book is," and that goes a long way too. So those are really important ways how to do it. And then let's say that the book that creator is doing is not your cup of tea, but you love trading cards and they have trading cards, go to their website and buy trading cards, because it might not support that book directly, but it indirectly supports that creator who's creating that book. And that's something that's very important too, is that a lot of creators have multiple books and multiple merchandising stuff. And if you buy their merchandise, that indirectly supports what they're doing. And that's another way how to support people. So that's a big one. As far as I'm concerned, I'm an independent comic creator. Not no, I'm not an independent comic creator yet. Yet, see, I tend to do this. I am an independent podcaster. I am a content creator, and I am going to be a comic creator soon enough, though. I promise. Whether it's this year or next year, I'm going to be doing something. Um, Whether people like it or not, that's up in the air. But I do create a lot of interviews, a lot of media stuff, and if you would like to advertise on my show, you are more than welcome to hit me up on Twitter at as I was saying, I do like money, so you can hit me up at my email, andrewedavis@hotmail.com. But also, you could buy my T-shirt. You can check out my eBay store, which is Pop Anime Comics Collectibles. I do have this bad boy coming out soon enough. I only have 58 of them. So, and the cosplayer is DJ Croft, and he is a guest at Wizard World this year. So he's going to have hopefully his 60 up there, and he's going to sell out, and then I'm going to be hopefully selling out mine, and that's the plan. So he's a big name to look out for, and I got 121 of those, but me and DJ split, and then I have a 50 run that I'm not about to disclose that is mine exclusively on eBay. Those are going to be like 20 to 25 bucks a pop. And then obviously, if you want to be a guest on my show, you can hit me up and maybe work something out. And if I like your project, I'll figure out how to get you on and work from there. So that's everything that's going on with me. Like the show, subscribe to the show, do whatever you want with my show. If you hate it, you could unsubscribe. That's fine too. And just remember, though, Brett knows some people in the mob, so it might be in your best interest to subscribe to my show on YouTube and like my Facebook page and buy me a coffee. That's up there too. So I appreciate money, and I'm sure Brett appreciates money too. So back to this campaign. And on that note, I'm going to give you the final word.
Well, yeah, thanks for having me. And yeah, support indie, even if it's just a couple bucks here and there or sharing out to your friends.
I couldn't have said it any better myself. That is a wrap, everybody.